You know what makes every outfit look better? The right bra from Third Love. Their bras make it easy to ultimate cleavage, a smooth look, or even stop your shirt buttons from pulling. They make over 60 sizes, including half cups you won't find anywhere else, so you'll find your perfect fit. Third Love solves bra problems, or what they call broblems. Real women test every style they make. Comfort and support are guaranteed. So stop settling for bad bras. You deserve better. Get your problem solved today. Save $15 on your first order with code podcast15 at thirdlove.com.
Sometime in the early 80s, REO Speedwagon's airplane made an unannounced, middle-of-the-night landing.
This is my friend Kyle MacLachlan, the star of Twin Peaks. And he's telling me about how he discovered a real-life Twin Peaks in rural North Carolina, not far from where he filmed Blue Velvet.
What was on the plane was copious amounts of drugs coming in from South America. Supposedly, Pablo Escobar went looking for other spots, quiet, out-of-the-way places to bring in his cocaine.
My name is Joshua Davis, and I'm an investigative reporter. Kyle and I talk all the time about the strange things we come across, but nothing was quite as strange as what we found in Varnamtown, North Carolina.
There's crooked cops, brother against brother. Everyone's got a story to tell, but does the truth even exist? Welcome to Varnamtown.
Varnamtown is available wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 340 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm doing very well.
Good.
Getting ready for Thanksgiving. My daughters are coming home from college. I'm pretty excited about that.
It's always a good time.
So, for those who celebrate it, we want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and give our Patreon shout outs. We had Sarah Navarro.
Hey, Sarah.
Beth Burns.
Well, thank you, Beth.
Hector Garcia.
Appreciate that, Hector.
Jamie Cornett jumped out to her highest level.
Oh, awesome, Jamie.
Jen.
What's going on, Jen?
Courtney H.
Hey, there's Courtney.
Margaret Beals.
Well, thank you so much, Margaret.
Mark Paul McManus jumped out to her highest level.
Well, that's awesome, MPM.
Caitlin Peterson.
What's happening, Caitlin?
Anita Ferguson.
There's Anita.
Rochelle.
Oh, good old Rochelle.
Destiny Mann.
Hey, Destiny.
Cheryl Bridman.
Redmond.
And last but not least, Jamie Luster.
Well, thanks, Jamie. Luster, is that part of the Games of Thrones or Game of Thrones or Jamie Luster? Sounds familiar.
Did you watch that show?
I did, but I don't remember.
It's Lannister,
okay.
Not Luster. If you did watch it, you were not paying very close attention.
Well, there's a lot of distractions in that.
There is. Yeah, there are. So if we go back into the vault, this week we selected Sam Marshall.
Hey, Sam.
Yeah, appreciate all that support. And we had a great PayPal donation from Travis Moen.
What's up, T? That's what I call Travis.
T, just T.
Yeah, if I ever met Travis, I'd be, hey, what's up, T?
Okay.
Yeah.
So thanks to everyone. Gibbs, we have a lot out right now. We posted a new Patreon episode on Saturday about the McCormicks. This is a father and son kind of duo. The dad owned this big ranch in Colorado and was accused of going into Denver, basically picking up transient workers or homeless men, getting them to work on his ranch and then killing them so that he didn't have to pay them.
Yeah, that's called free labor.
Yeah, and then the son was into a lot of stuff too, and it was kind of hard to tell who was doing what.
Yeah, little crime ring there.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on TCAT, we're talking about William Palmer, a British doctor known as the Rugeley Poisoner.
Yeah,
this
very
goes
bad guy.
Oh, very bad guy. This goes back to the 1850s. This was a man who racked up big gambling debts, was left a lot of money, ran through that money, and basically was willing to kill anyone, including members of his own family.
The fact that it was back in the 1850s doesn't matter. It could play today.
Oh my gosh. It's just like something ripped out of today's headlines. But it's suspected that he poisoned up to 15 people.
Yeah.
All right, buddy. Are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved?
I am.
We're talking about Kelly Dae Wilson. 17-year-old Kelly Dae Wilson went missing on January 5th, 1992. 2 years later, 8 individuals were arrested and charged with her murder, including the officer who investigated her disappearance. Prosecutors alleged that Kelly was killed in a satanic cult ritual. Those charges were dropped due to lack of evidence, and her case remains unsolved. So we know what we're in for here, and it's a lot.
It is a lot.
And I think you said on Patreon, is it surprising that we're talking about Satanism, a satanic cult ritual, 80s, into the early 90s? And I would say, no, not really.
Pretty common.
But how many times have you heard of an officer investigating someone's disappearance being charged?
Yeah, that's a little different.
Yeah, it's a new one on me.
But there was a lot of people that were arrested into this case.
Yeah, I just said there were 8 individuals. That is a lot.
I just want to make sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
You just really want to emphasize that it's a lot.
I did.
Okay. Kelly Dae Wilson was born on May 18th, 1974. Her parents are Kathy Carlson and Robbie Dale Wilson. They divorced after 14 years of marriage and both remarried. Kathy Carlson told the Tyler Morning Telegraph that Kelly was fun-loving, strong-willed, and outgoing. She could have a conversation with anyone she met.
There's some people that can do that.
There are. And then there are people who are, much shyer. It takes them a while to open up. They're not going to just walk up to someone at a party and start a conversation.
Yeah.
Kelly was also compassionate. She once invited a friend and her baby to live with her for a few months when she needed a place to stay. Kelly did well in school and had goals for her future. She wanted to go to college and become an occupational therapist.
Sounds like she had a good head on her shoulder.
Sounds like it. Goals, future-oriented. Kelly wasn't always sure, though, where she wanted to live. Her father moved to Louisiana after the divorce, and her mother stayed in Gilmer, Texas. Kelly spent a few years in Louisiana and moved back to Texas at the age of 16. She struggled emotionally after her parents divorced, but in the fall of 1991, she talked to her mother and told her she knew it was time to move forward.
I think a lot of kids struggle emotionally when it comes to divorce.
Yeah, I think you're right. Let's face it. It's not an easy thing to go through. I went through it, but I was fairly young, so I don't really remember the emotions that I was experiencing.
But if you have parents that live in 2 separate states,
that can be difficult to try to see them and have to be shuffled back and forth. Kelly went missing on January 5th, 1992. That evening, she was working a shift at Northeast Texas Video in downtown Gilmer with her boss, Joe David Henry. Kelly and Joe left work at 8:30 p.m. So we're in the early 90s here, the heyday of kind of video rental.
Oh, yeah.
Miss those days.
I know you missed that back room in the corner.
Definitely miss Blockbuster. My wife and I were talking about it the other day. That was like Friday night, date night type thing.
It really was.
Let's go to Blockbuster.
And you wanted to get there early.
To make sure you got good movies because they only had so many copies.
How many times did you go up to the return station to see if anything good was returned?
Oh, a bunch.
Yeah.
And I'd make them go through the little return basket to see if the movie I wanted had been returned. Kelly went to the Gilmer National Bank to deposit the receipts for the day. The bank was just half a block down the street from the store. Kelly was photographed by security cameras at 8:35 p.m., and the receipts were found in the bank's night depository. So that's important, right? As we're starting the story, it means we know she made it to the bank.
Yeah.
She's caught on video surveillance, and obviously the receipts were put in the depository because they found them. But Kelly was never seen again after this. Kelly's mom and stepfather were worried because she never came home that night. They found her car parked at the side of the video store. Kelly's purse was still inside her car, but the keys were missing. Additionally, one of her tires was slashed.
A little strange that someone takes the keys, but not the purse.
Well, strange when they take the keys to the car, but don't take the car, but also leave the purse inside. Gilmer Police Sergeant James Brown worked the case from the beginning. Sergeant Brown told the media, as quoted by the Tyler Courier-Times, she undoubtedly had a flat. When she went to the bank, the tire was completely off the wheel. So he's saying she drove the car to the bank, which was not that far.
On a flat tire.
On a very flat tire, so flat that it basically came off almost.
It makes you wonder, did she not hear that? Or did she hear it and say, I got this money on me, my tire's flat, best thing I can do is just get up here to the bank and make that deposit.
Yeah, and then we don't know, right? Did she drive back to the video store? Did somebody else drive the car back to the video store? Brown said it was possible Kelly drove back to the store to get help changing her tire or try to find a ride home. And that sounds reasonable to me. You know, we said it was only, half a block
right
down the road. So at some point, she had to have realized that something was wrong with her tire. And maybe she thought getting back to the store was her best option.
Yeah, I don't think everybody knows how bad that is for your for your wheel to drive on that.
Yeah.
So I think some people just continue to drive on it until they get to a place that they feel more secure versus stopping immediately to limit the damage that it can do to your rim.
Well, we're talking about a 17-year-old here.
Yeah.
You know, she's not at the pit crew at Indy. She doesn't, I'm assuming she doesn't have a vast knowledge of cars. And I don't know that I would have it at 17 either. I don't know that I have today. I know you shouldn't drive on your rim, though. I do know that. Joe Henry, Kelly's boss, was one of the first people questioned because he was the last person who saw Kelly. During his final conversation with Kelly, he confirmed that she was supposed to open the store at noon on January 6th, but she didn't show up. In a later interview with KETK, he said he assumed Kelly had stayed out all night. And I thought that was kind of a strange statement to make. Why would he assume she stayed out all night? Was she a partier, or was it just because she didn't show up? She must have stayed out all night.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of assumptions there.
Yes. Yeah, I would say that's true. Joe Henry was eventually cleared as a potential suspect because he had an alibi and passed a polygraph, according to the news outlet KETK. And I would say both of those things are good. It's good to have an alibi.
It is.
Assuming they checked it out, they verified it, which I assume they did. It's also good to pass a polygraph. But we've also seen where alibis that once were ironclad turned out to not be true at all. And we know that people can pass polygraph tests who ultimately turn out to be the ones who perpetrated the crime. I'm not saying Joe Henry did.
No, I mean, it certainly helps him.
Yes, it doesn't hurt. Does it mean definitively 100% that he couldn't have done it? Well, it really comes down to his alibi, which we don't know all the details of. But, you know, if it's just someone's mom saying that they were there, well, we know moms have lied in other cases.
Of course. Moms always, not always, but there's many times that they will protect their child.
Yeah, absolutely. According to the Chicago Tribune, he did mention that Kelly was conflicted about which house she wanted to live in. Henry also said that Sergeant Brown considered the idea that Kelly ran away because of family pressures.
Well, I think she had a pretty good relationship with her family.
It seemed like she did. Kelly's father, Robbie Wilson, said she had never run away before. That was contrary to her personality. Now, does it mean she couldn't have? No. absolutely it doesn't mean that. But I'll say what I always say. If you're going to run away, wouldn't you want your purse? Wouldn't you want, maybe your car?
Just seems like there would have been a better way to do it
Yes.
if you wanted to run away.
Yes. Then right after you got off work, maybe. I don't know. Now, she is only 17, so can she legally just voluntarily leave? She's not an adult, is what I'm saying.
Right.
He told the Tyler Morning Telegraph, since her mother and I divorced, she's been through lots of stress, but nothing lately would indicate anything severe enough to up and run off. In fact, things were going pretty well. She had just made the decision to stay with her mother until she finished school, and she seemed very content.
So really no conflict of where she needs to stay then. She already made that decision.
Yeah, it sounds like, according to him, she'd already made the decision, but she was going through a lot of stress. Would you say that most 17-year-olds experience a pretty good amount of stress?
I would say absolutely.
It's a stressful time in life.
Yeah.
I don't know what time's not stressful, but those are stressful times. Relationships.
Big decisions coming up.
Yeah, school, college, got to get through high school, got to get good grades, all that type of stuff. According to the Chicago Tribune, there was reportedly bad blood between Kelly's current boyfriend, Chris Denton, and her past boyfriends. Okay, that's not all that unusual.
Yeah, you're going to have jealous guys out there, might not like the new boyfriend, and, the previous boyfriends want her back, and you're going to have some rifts going on.
Yeah, that was very normal from what I remember in high school. The Charlie Project reported that Chris was known for having a bad temper. KETK also reported that he failed a polygraph, but the police couldn't find any evidence that he was involved in Kelly's disappearance.
So, bad temper, didn't pass the polygraph.
Not great signs.
No.
Right? We said about her boss, pretty good signs. Alibi, passed the polygraph. Boyfriend, bad temper, didn't pass the polygraph. Bad signs. But what does it really mean? You have no evidence, so it means very little.
Unless you have a way to tie him to the disappearance, what are you going to do?
The FBI joined the search days after Kelly disappeared, but there were few leads for them to follow up on. The police and hundreds of volunteers searched wooded areas for her body, but found nothing. On April 24th, 1992, 17-year-old Michael Bybee was arrested and charged with criminal mischief for slashing one of Kelly's tires. His arrest was considered a good stepping stone towards solving her disappearance. And I could see why people would think that. Doesn't it seem as though the slashing of her tires would in some way be connected possibly with her disappearance?
You would think, right? Here's a kid that slashed her tire, which meant she really couldn't drive anywhere, or if she did, not very far, which would make it easier for that person to abduct her if that's what they had in mind.
Kelly's stepmother, Waverlyn Wilson, told the Tyler Morning Telegraph that they believe Michael was an acquaintance of Kelly, but they didn't know each other well, and they didn't hang out. According to the Charlie Project, Michael admitted to slashing the tire, but maintained that he knew nothing about Kelly's disappearance. He said he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Prosecutors argued that he put Kelly in harm's way by flattening her tire and leaving her vulnerable without transportation. The defense said that the tire slashing was a random act of senseless violence and that the consequences of his actions were not reasonably foreseeable.
But I like what the prosecution said, though. I mean, he did put her at risk.
Yeah. Yeah. When you disable somebody's car at night, you are in some way putting them at risk. I don't understand this guy completely. He admits to slashing the tire, but then says he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Does that mean he didn't mean to slash her tire, or he slashed her tire and then she went missing, meaning he really picked a bad time to slash her tire?
Yeah, I think that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, but that's just really bad timing if that's what happened.
If I knew that was going to happen, I wouldn't have did it that night. I would have waited.
On December 31st, 1992, Sergeant James Brown released sketches of two possible suspects at a press conference. James Brown, jump back, kiss myself.
Feels
God.
good. Feels good.
The Gilmore police decided to turn to a psychic for help. At the request of Kelly's parents, the sketches were made on instructions from psychic Noreen Rainier, who was credited with helping resolve several missing persons cases. So this is interesting. I mean, we talk about sketches all the time, composite sketches.
We do.
But they're normally made up from an eyewitness. Here we have a psychic.
Yeah.
Who is what? Telling police that the two suspects in her mind look like this.
What her vision of them are.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I don't know if I've ever heard of that before.
But they're going to take this because she has some level of success.
Apparently, she was credited with helping resolve several missing persons cases. Brown said at the press conference, per the Tyler Morning Telegraph, what we're asking for is that people look at these sketches to see if they either saw anyone at the store that night or can identify who these people are. Mrs. Rainier believes they were on a familiar basis with Kelly. This is her psychic perception. Now, Brown conceded that people would be skeptical, but said, I'm going to try everything in my power to try and find her, and there's no reason we shouldn't try every option available. Mrs. Rainier does have a proven track record with other police departments, and you never know. With one string of evidence, the whole case may unravel.
So it really seems like Sergeant Brown's really working this case.
Well, I think what he's saying does make a little bit of sense. I mean, are people going to be skeptical? Yeah, I'm skeptical of psychics. I've said that before.
Skeptical of me.
I'm skeptical of a lot of things.
Yeah.
Very skeptical of you. But what he's saying is, what is it going to hurt? Is almost what I'm taking from it. If it turns out to be something, great. Maybe it, breaks open the whole case. If not, no big deal.
Yeah.
But are there ramifications of that? Later down the road, could a defense attorney say, well, my client looks nothing like these two sketches, or something like that? I think prosecutors could get around that pretty easily.
I think so too.
True Crime All the Time Unsolved is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Hey, TCAT listeners, whether you love true crime or comedies, celebrity interviews, news, or even motivational speakers, you call the shots on what's in your podcast queue, right? And guess what? Now you can call the shots on your auto insurance too. Enter the Name Your Price tool from Progressive. The Name Your Price tool puts you in charge of your auto insurance by working just the way it sounds. You tell Progressive how much you want to pay for car insurance, then they'll show you a variety of coverages that fit within your budget, giving you options. Now that's something you'll want to press play on. It's easy to start a quote and you'll be able to choose the best option for you fast. It's just one of the many ways you can save with Progressive Insurance. Quote today at Progressive.com to try the Name Your Price tool for yourself and join the over 28 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Hey folks, I want to introduce you to a new sponsor, Via Hemp Company. They sell a wide range of CBD and THC products in all 50 states and are shipped discreetly to your door. And I've been taking one of their most popular products. They have these low-dose gummies that are a perfect way to microdose THC. Well, what does that mean? Microdosing is when you consume small amounts of THC in order to gain the benefits of cannabis without experiencing that strong psychoactive effect. It can give you additional benefits beyond what standard CBD offers. I've noticed, for me, some of the benefits have included managing pain, easing anxiety, enhancing my mood, and improving my sleep. If you are 21 and over and want to try their products, go to viahemp.com and use code TRUECRIME for 15% off. Plus, they will add a free pack of their award-winning THC gummies to your order. Go to the link in the description or type in VIIAHEMP.com and use code TRUECRIME for 15% off plus free gummies. I've been learning from Masterclass for a while now. You may have heard me talk about learning to cook from Gordon Ramsay. Right now, I'm learning about disruptive entrepreneurship from Richard Branson. It's fun and it's information that I can use in my everyday business life. This fall, learn from the best to become your best with Masterclass, from leadership to negotiating to creativity to cooking. Whether you're watching Masterclass on TV, listening in audio mode in the app, or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes from the world's best? Easily tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a Masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. And right now, our listeners will get an additional 15% off an annual membership at masterclass.com/unsolved. Get 15% off right now at masterclass.com/unsolved, masterclass.com/unsolved. On January 16th, 1993, Michael Bybee reported that he was walking down the street at 1:20 a.m. when two men grabbed him, forced him into a car, and drove him to an unknown location. They beat him and left him to walk back to town alone. The Tyler Morning Telegraph reported that Sergeant Brown presumed Bybee told police that during the ordeal, he was questioned about the disappearance of Kelly Dae Wilson. But it doesn't seem like this alleged kidnapping was connected to Kelly's case.
He was just randomly picked up and beat up for a little bit, I guess, huh?
I doubt it was random. It could have been for a reason that had nothing to do with Kelly's disappearance, or it could have been carried out by someone or persons unknown who thought he did have something to do with it, and they were going to exact a little justice of their own.
Try to beat it out of him.
In 1993, a grand jury investigated Kelly's disappearance. On June 4th, they indicted 20-year-old Brent Lee Ward for aggravated perjury. Ward is the cousin of Kelly's boyfriend, Chris Denton. The indictment alleged that Ward lied to the grand jury in May when he said he was in a truck with Chris Denton on January 5th, 1992. Ward was indicted again on August 27th, 1993. The second indictment alleged that he lied to the grand jury when he denied that he asked a woman named Mandy Kramer to help him develop an alibi for January 5th, 1992. So this kind of goes back to my statement, right? That alibis are great as long as they're real and can hold up.
Right.
Now we're getting a sense that maybe Chris Denton's alibi is not as rock solid as it first appeared to be.
Seems to be falling apart.
The grand jury held its final session in August 1993 and called Kelly's disappearance a continuing mystery, according to the Longview News Journal. The aggravated perjury indictments were dismissed by a state district judge on September 20th of that year. But on October 25th, Ward was reindicted by a county grand jury on both perjury charges. They're really going after this guy.
They really are.
For perjury. On November 30th of that year, Michael Bybee received a 90-day sentence and a $500 fine for slashing Kelly's tires. He was released on January 13th, 1994. So we talked about a number of people, persons of interest, I'll say, that were looked at very hard after Kelly's disappearance. But in 1994, things got really heated because on January 21st, 8 suspects, including Sergeant James Brown, were indicted for aggravated kidnapping, aggravated sexual assault, and capital murder. The other suspects were Roger Don Holman, Geneva Skipper Kerr, Eugene Wendell Kerr, Wendell Eugene Kerr, Danny Oscar Kerr, Wanda Lou Kerr, and Tammy Jo Smith. So there's a lot of Kerrs in there.
There are.
There's also 2 guys whose names are just switched around. Which I found very interesting. The indictment said that Kelly Wilson was kidnapped with the intent of sexual abuse and was fatally stabbed on January 14th after being held captive in a shed and toolbox. So it's very specific. The other thing that really jumps out at me is just the number of people indicted.
It's a large number for sure.
We've seen large numbers before, but I can tell you right now, what I've never seen, or I don't believe I've ever seen or heard of, is an officer investigating the disappearance of someone.
Being tossed in
as the suspect and actually charged. The other suspects, excluding Brown, had previously been indicted on 48 counts of aggravated sexual assault or indecency with a child. In May and June 1993, 10 people were arrested on child molestation charges. Most of them were members of the Kerr family. An affidavit filed to obtain a search warrant for the home of Eugene and Geneva Kerr contained allegations that children were sacrificed in satanic rituals and that some of the Kerr children may have witnessed this. Special Prosecutor Scott Lyford said no evidence of cult activities was found on the family property, and it appeared the family had anticipated the search and cleaned up.
How do you anticipate the search? Maybe you get a
tip from someone in law enforcement, or maybe there was just nothing to be found. I don't know. Prosecutor Lyford said in his announcement that the information about Kelly Wilson came to light after the authorities moved two of the women charged with child abuse, Connie Martin and Wanda Kerr, to another jail to get them away from the others. Connie Martin had 5 children with Danny Kerr. She was not indicted in the murder case because she cooperated with the authorities. Lyford also said the investigation would potentially include at least 4 to 5 other deaths, but no search for bodies was being conducted. So, I mean, at the very least, you'd have to say this whole thing's a little cryptic.
It is.
We have a lot of members of this Kerr family who were said to have been arrested on, child molestation charges. And a bunch of these people, including Sergeant Brown, were involved with abducting Kelly Wilson, sexually assaulting her, and murdering her.
But they don't have her body.
No, and they're saying maybe they're responsible for 4 to 5 other deaths, but they're not even searching for those other people or their bodies.
They're just going off what Connie Martin has told them.
That's what it sounds like. The Kerrs were a Texas family described as country people. According to the Chicago Tribune, they lived in tar paper shacks and old trailers. According to an individual named Cloy Kerr, the family's problem started in 1990 when Wendell Kerr wanted to divorce his wife, Loretta. Loretta suspected he was leaving her for a younger woman, so she accused him of abusing their children. Wendell was later convicted of child molestation and put on probation. Ann Gore, a child welfare worker, concluded that other family members were sexually abusing their children during her investigation. In an affidavit, Gore said that in October 1992, 2 of the children took Debbie Minshew and me to show us where the devil people meet to sexually abuse and kill the babies. According to the Longview News Journal, a 5-year-old child said she saw Kelly Wilson being tortured and raped at the suspect's home.
It's a 5-year-old kid.
And I think this has come up in a lot of other cases, especially involving allegations of satanic rituals. And, there have been kids who have said things that have later turned out to not be true at all. Now, where they got that information, it's hard telling. I'm not saying that's 100% the case here, but it definitely has been that in some other cases. Gore and Debbie Minshew, another CPS worker, concluded that the Kerrs were involved in satanic practices. And it does sound, Gibbs, like it really came down to a couple of children telling these 2 women that they had seen some really bad things going on.
Yeah.
The 2 brought their findings to local DA Tim Cohn. He couldn't work the case because he had previously represented some of the defendants. The social worker suggested that he recommend Scott Lyford, a Galveston lawyer, to be named special prosecutor. D.A. Cohn and the judge didn't personally know Lyford, but the social worker said he had experience handling cases involving satanic cults. David Riley, then the regional operations manager of CPS, said that the social workers overstepped the boundaries of their professional competency by acting more like detectives than child care workers, according to the Chicago Tribune.
Maybe there is a fine line there.
I think there's a line, but I agree with you. It might be a fine line. What's your job? To ensure the welfare of children. But if a couple of the children are telling you that other children are being abused and harmed in what sounds like satanic rituals, should you then tell that to someone else?
I think so.
I think so too. Now, it may turn out to not be true, but don't you have a duty, a responsibility to at least alert somebody, tell them what you were told, and then let prosecutors or whoever it is
take it from there?
Take it from there. I get it. It's not their job to investigate the family.
No.
Let's say to see if they were into, satanic practices or whatever, but they are responsible for making sure that these children are
the health and welfare.
Yeah. Being cared for correctly. Lyford could find no evidence to support the claims that the family was a murderous cult. But as we talked about, he obtained a search warrant for a farm property where investigators found a bone fragment. However, a lab concluded that there was a 50-50 chance that it was a human bone and estimated it could be over 100 years old.
Well, then that would probably not be something tied to this case.
No, probably not. After the family members were arrested for child molestation, 17 children were taken into state custody. 10 of them lived with James and Marie Anna Lapp, who were licensed foster parents. Among the children living with them was 7-year-old Danny Kerr and his siblings, the children of Danny Kerr and Connie Barton. The Lapp family eventually moved to Colorado City, Colorado, with the children. On November 7th, 1993, the Lapps brought Danny to the hospital and claimed he fell down the stairs. They said they made him run up and down the stairs as a punishment for using vulgar language. Danny became angry and passed out. According to Colorado City Police Chief David Montgomery, this was something the children did.
Well, maybe they use vulgar language all the time because that's what they were taught.
Or what they witnessed on a daily basis. I don't know. Montgomery, though, theorized that Lapp hurt Danny when he tried to shake him awake. He said, per the Tyler Morning Telegraph, I think he lost it. He lost control. Everything came together to one point. Probably in 60 seconds of anger and frustration, he ruined a lifetime of good deeds. So he's coming out and saying that his theory is that James Lapp killed this boy.
Out of having a bad temper?
Yeah.
Yeah.
On November 8th, 57-year-old James Lapp fatally shot himself at his home in Colorado City. He wrote a note that said, if Danny dies, it will be my fault. So maybe that theory was not wrong at all.
Yeah.
Or pretty much on the mark.
It sounds like he couldn't live with the fact that he killed his 7-year-old foster child.
That's what it sounds like. 2 days later, Marie Lapp died of a drug overdose. Her death was ruled a suicide. Marie wrote a note that said, to lose my children and my husband in one day is more than I can endure. Danny was beaten so badly that he went into a coma. Medical professionals believed Danny would never make a full recovery and that he would spend the rest of his life as a ward of the state. So obviously this was much more than shaking a child awake who had passed out. This kid was beaten.
Yeah.
Severely. And maybe it was 60 seconds of anger and frustration, as the police chief said it was. And maybe every other deed in this guy's life was a good deed. I don't know. But this was horrible.
That's all it takes.
In late 1993, after hearing that Lyford, Gore, and Minshew were investigating whether Kelly was kidnapped and murdered by the Kerr's alleged cult, Sergeant James Brown began looking into this possible connection In December 1993, he presented his findings to Prosecutor Lyford and found that one of Lyford's key witnesses, an inmate, recanted his earlier statements about witnessing murders. Wendell Kerr, another main suspect, was on the East Coast when Kelly was believed to be killed. This was supported by records from the trucking company that employed him.
So a decent alibi.
Yeah, I think pretty decent. It also sounds as though Sergeant Brown is kind of blowing a hole or a couple of holes in the prosecutor's case. Gilmer Police Chief Al McAllister told the Chicago Tribune that Lyford told Brown to keep his nose out of the investigation and threatened to ruin him politically, professionally, and financially if he didn't. And Brown was indicted a month later.
So you can conclude from that the prosecutor got his revenge on Sergeant Brown.
Yeah, it certainly seems that way, right? He was told to butt out. He didn't, and he was indicted a month later. Additionally, Brown's lawyers argued that Connie Martin, the witness who turned on the rest of the family, had changed her statement about James Brown several times. Brown's attorney, David Moore, said, Lyford told me that when he informed Connie of Brown's indictment, she said, "Oh, I can give you the names of 5 others too." Later, she told Lyford she'd only been kidding.
Only been kidding. That's nice.
About implicating 5 other people in the kidnapping and murder of a 17-year-old girl? I don't think that's something you should be kidding around about. The only other evidence in the Kelly Wilson case was the report that a child of the defendants claimed they saw the murder. However, under a FOIA request, the Dallas Morning News obtained the social worker's files, which showed that the child denied seeing any murders and only made the statement after repeatedly being questioned for long periods of time. And I think maybe that's where we go back to, someone saying that the social workers really overstepped their bounds.
Yeah.
We've seen historically people get in trouble when they, do this act of leading questions or, questioning young kids for a very long time, wearing them down, almost like they're getting them to try to say what they want them to say.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I get it. Investigators are pretty rough on adults sometimes in the way that they question them. And I think sometimes they have to be to get to the truth, and sometimes they cross the line. But when you're talking about a young child, let's say a 5-year-old child,
right,
you cannot question them the same way that you would question a 30-year-old suspect.
No, you can't. And you shouldn't.
You should never. The community was shocked by the arrest of James Brown. Richard Spruill, a Baptist minister and police department chaplain, told the Chicago Tribune that Brown was an officer who worked extra hours because he was so dedicated to solving crime, saying James would go out looking for stolen goods and come back with so much, it'd look like he'd been on safari.
Well, it sounds like James was good at his job.
Well, and I think a lot of people liked him, respected him, and were shocked, like I said. When he was arrested, Kathy and Robert Carlson, Kelly's mother and stepfather, said they believed Brown was innocent. Kathy accused officials of looking for a scapegoat. She said they wouldn't believe the charges until they had cold, hard evidence. And I think it's the one big problem that I have so far, or maybe one of the big problems is, okay, we're indicting a lot of people here, including a police officer, based on what? The words of a 5-year-old child, the words of Connie Martin, who was offered a deal to turn on her family and possibly turn on James Brown as well, because that's what the prosecutor wanted. It's kind of where this thing is leading.
And didn't she even admit that she was joking?
Well, she was joking that she could name 5 others.
Yeah.
I don't know that she said she was joking about Brown. Kelly's father, Robbie Wilson, said, per the Longview News Journal, I spent a lot of time with Sergeant Brown over the last couple of years. I am no expert, but I am not that bad of a judge of character. I find that hard to believe. Robbie and his wife said that Sergeant Brown followed up on even the least likely tips in Kelly's case. He put ads in the paper and helped raise money for a highway billboard. He and Kelly's parents searched the woods together to look for her body. He even looked for her during his vacation time. Now, you can make the argument that this guy is incredibly dedicated to his job, or you could play devil's advocate and say, if someone, let's say him, was involved in it, wouldn't he want to go out of his way to make it seem as though he was going all out?
Yeah, you could play it either way.
You could play it either way, but I think what you're hearing from everyone who knew this guy was that they just didn't believe it.
Right. Wasn't his character.
On February 10th, 1994, Brown's attorney filed a motion requesting deposition from Connie Sue Martin. According to the motion, a witness told a prosecutor in the case that Brown sexually assaulted Kelly and was present when she was killed. Special prosecutor Scott Lyford quoted Connie Martin as saying that Brown wasn't present for the abduction, but came to the location where Kelly was reportedly held and allegedly returned several times to sexually assault her. In March 1994, while the defendants were still awaiting trial, the Gilmore police said they still considered Kelly to be a missing person. So how fascinating is that? That you have 8 people charged with sexual assault, kidnapping, and murder.
Yeah.
But the police are saying, we're still viewing this as a missing persons case.
So you have to say, well, then why am I charged with a capital murder?
On March 14th of that year, a judge dismissed all the charges related to the kidnapping, sexual assault, and murder of Kelly Wilson, citing insufficient evidence. Sergeant Brown was released from prison, but the other defendants still had to face the charges in the child molestation case. Brown was reinstated in the police department the next day, but he chose to stay on voluntary sick leave. According to the Tyler Courier-Times, Police Chief Al McAllister said that Brown was on a roller coaster ride emotionally. Sometimes he's very calm, sometimes very emotional and very upset, sometimes sad. He feels he's been done a grave injustice. And I'm telling you right now, how could he not feel that way if he had nothing whatsoever to do with what happened to Kelly Wilson?
Yeah. Of course he's going to feel sick.
I mean, just to have your name in the news as being indicted, being charged with these heinous crimes. And then you're what? You're going to go back on the police force and you're going to go out and try to do your job when people have seen your face and they know what you were accused of doing. McAllister also said that Brown's career had been ruined because of the allegations against him. And again, I don't know how that couldn't be the case. Could he still be a police officer? Technically, yes. Could he be as effective? Could he still have, the same outlook on the job that he had before all of this? How does he even believe in the justice system?
I think it'd be tough
at this point.
I think he'd be constantly worried that you're going to get railroaded.
If you don't go along with exactly what some special prosecutor or whoever says, you should do, butt out.
Then you have to worry about how your credibility looks. It'd be tough.
Brent Ward, the cousin of Kelly's former boyfriend, Chris Denton, was found not guilty of one count of perjury on September 13th, 1994. However, on August 26, 1995, he was convicted of 2 counts of perjury and sentenced to 3 years in prison and a $5,000 fine. The prosecution argued that Ward withheld information about Chris Denton. Upshur County DA Tim Cohn said that Chris Denton was the key to Kelly's case and that Ward was the key to Chris Denton. And this is kind of what we talked about before.
We did.
Somebody's alibi. It's rock solid until it's not. Until you find out that somebody was either lying or not telling the entire truth. And then, what you thought about this person, meaning they're not on your radar, you don't view them as a suspect, years later, or however many years later, that has to totally change because the circumstances are now different.
Now you have to look at that whole piece again. Where was he really? What was he really doing?
Prosecutors argued that he lied to the grand jury about working at Holly Lake Ranch on January 5th, 1992. A coworker named Steve Hedrick testified that Ward asked him to tell investigators he was at work that day, but timesheets proved otherwise.
Why would you tell your buddy to lie?
Well, according to Hedrick, Ward told him he was worried because he and two friends were at the video store 15 minutes before closing, and they were messing around with Kelly Wilson. So I don't know what this means for Chris Denton, but you'd have to say this Ward character doesn't look great in all of this. You know, if he really puts himself at the store 15 minutes before closing and says that he was messing around with her, if he really asked someone to lie to give him an alibi and he really wasn't at work, okay, what does that mean? It doesn't conclusively mean he had something to do with it, but it sure doesn't make him look good. Sergeant James Brown eventually left the department after he suffered a stroke. He also sued former special prosecutor Scott Lyford and his investigators. The suit accused them of coaching the children to tell stories about satanic rituals. And, you know, and I will say it again, if this guy, James Brown, had nothing to do, and it seems as though he didn't, you have to really feel bad for this dude.
You do.
His life was changed forever. Now, would he have still had a stroke if it hadn't happened? Maybe. Did the anxiety and, you know, all the emotions that came with what he went through cause the stroke? Maybe. I don't know. On November 3rd, 1995, the Texas Attorney General's office filed a motion to dismiss almost all the charges in the child abuse case against the Kerr family. The office charged that the investigative team led by Scott Lyford mishandled interviews and manipulated the children. Lyford was removed from the case by the Attorney General. 45 of 48 indictments against 10 defendants were dismissed.
That's huge.
That is a lot. And, you know, them basically coming out and saying that, you know, these interviews, the children were manipulated. Does it back up what James Brown alleged, which was that they were coached to tell some stories about satanic rituals and who was there and seeing Kelly Wilson and all of that? Maybe it does. And I don't know what to think about, you know, members of this Kerr family. 45 of 48 indictments dismissed. So that means that 3 indictments weren't. So somebody in that family may have done something wrong, but you would definitely feel bad for the ones who didn't.
Of course not.
Just like you would feel bad for, you know, James Brown. On May 21st, 2002, a human skull was found in the woods near Gladewater, Texas, off Texas 135. The skull was found close to Gilmer. Investigators determined that the skull belonged to a white female between 20 and 30 years old. She had been dead for at least 2 years, but possibly up to 15 years. Investigators and Kelly's family were hopeful that they had found her remains, but the skull did not match Kelly's dental records. And this is something you and I have discussed before. We know it's tough on the families of someone who has disappeared, but when they get this kind of hope and then that hope is dashed, that's got to be really tough.
Yeah.
That's got to be, you know, part of the roller coaster. You're up, you're down, you're hopeful, you're despondent.
I think, you know, you're thinking, oh, finally, this is probably going to lock this away for us. And, you know,
at least we'll know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it turns out not to be her. Kelly's former boyfriend, Chris Denton, died of cancer in 2004. There were rumors that he made a deathbed confession about her, but by all accounts, this is not true. Denton maintained his innocence until the end. In 2004, Joe David Henry, the former owner of Northeast Texas Video, was arrested on child pornography charges. Authorities emphasized that he was not a suspect in Kelly's case.
Interesting stuff coming out, though.
But there's a lot of people doing a lot of bad things, many of whom are connected in some way to Kelly Wilson. Doesn't mean they had anything to do with her disappearance or her murder, if that's what happened to her. But you'd have to say they're doing some really bad stuff.
Yeah.
January 2024 will mark the 32nd anniversary of Kelly's disappearance. Kelly was described as a white female with blonde hair and blue eyes. At the time of her disappearance, she was 5'7", 120 pounds. She was wearing a dark purple rugby shirt with a red, gold, and white insignia and a white collar and cuffs, stone-washed, cut-off jean shorts, white socks, brown suede loafers, and several pieces of gold jewelry, including a distinctive gold and diamond ring with an inset Mexican coin. If you have any information about the disappearance of Kelly Dae Wilson, you can contact the Gilmer Police Department at 903-843-5545. You can also call Upshur County Crime Stoppers at 1-800-396-3351. Crime Stoppers is offering a $5,000 reward, and you can make an anonymous tip. So I think, Gibbs, as we wrap up this case, it's a wild one, mostly for the number of people who were charged, the reasons why they were charged with, the kidnapping, sexual assault, and murder of Kelly Wilson. There seems to be, at the end of the day, very little in the way of real evidence that backed up those charges. And to me, that is so super scary.
Really scary.
That you can be indicted and charged for, a litany of really terrible crimes based on what? The manipulated interviews of some very small children and or a woman who was part of the Kerr family who got a sweetheart deal to say whatever it is they wanted her to say.
To benefit herself.
Right. That's scary stuff to me. And it's also life ruining for the people who didn't have anything to do, but were, lumped in with it.
Yeah. Sometimes once people hear about something like that, if they don't hear the rest of that story, the follow-up, in their minds that these individuals did that thing.
Or sometimes even when they do hear it, it's not enough in their minds for them not to think these people had something to do with it.
Yeah.
Even though there's no real evidence. Well, they wouldn't have charged them. And I'll tell you, at some point in time, I probably had the same thought. But in doing as many cases as you and I have done, I don't believe that at all in the slightest. People have been indicted, have been charged, and then it comes out that there was no evidence to back it up whatsoever. So why were they charged in the first place? I do think there were some elements of satanic panic here. Most of that was in the 80s, right? But
it was.
I'm sure it kind of bled over into the early 90s as well. You had a special prosecutor who kind of had dealt with the satanic stuff before. It sounds like he really ran with that angle and tried to make things fit where they really didn't.
Right. And
I think that's my biggest problem. We shouldn't be molding the evidence for it to show what we want it to show.
It should just flow natural.
It should just be what it is.
Yep.
And that is either enough to prove that someone did something or it's not. But once we get into manipulating and twisting and, giving people deals to say things that benefit them, but really aren't true.
There's the problem.
I have a real big problem with that because you're messing with people's lives.
Exactly.
Now, I'm not saying that all the members of the Kerr family are saints because obviously there were some charges that were not dismissed there. And I don't know everything about the child molestation charges.
But at the end of the day, this case is still unsolved.
And it's still a mystery.
Yeah. After all these years. I don't know if they ever would be able to solve it if they can't have a body to do any testing on.
Well, and even if they had the body at this point, would they have anything left to test? I don't know.
Yeah.
I do think, along with ruining people's lives by charging people that we shouldn't charge, do you also not harm the investigation?
Well, I think you do. I think, Sergeant Brown was on a path and was diverted and never re-engaged. And at that point, I think that the case suffered from that.
I think so as well. But that's it for our episode on Kelly Wilson. We got some voicemails, Gibbs. You want to check those out?
Let's hear them.
Hey, Mike and Gibby, it's Sam here from Manchester in England. I'm just calling to say that I absolutely love listening to the podcast. I listened to TCAT and I got through it pretty quick, and I'm on Unsolved at the moment. For some reason, the Unsolved just seems to be a little bit more harrowing, seeing as they've not been solved. And I work from home, and so does my husband, but recently they've asked him to start going in the office 2 days a week. And I've got to admit, I can't listen to you the day before because it makes me too nervous when I'm in the house on my own all day when the kids are at school. Keep doing what you're doing. Stay safe. Keep your own time ticking.
All right. Thanks for the voicemail, Sam. Appreciate it. Love the accent. Digging the accent. You put her accent up against yours, Gibby.
Was it good? Because I couldn't hear a thing.
Oh, my gosh. There's no comparison. Hers is cool.
Yeah.
Yours is, I don't even know what to call it.
What accent did she use?
Well, I mean, it's British, but what part? I don't know.
Okay.
You noticed I didn't say British.
British?
No. I find that fascinating that people from different parts of Britain have these different accents.
Oh, yeah.
Much like people from United States.
Yeah.
Different
like
parts.
Liverpool has a really distinct,
cool one.
Yeah.
Okay. I got you.
Yeah.
I'm going to make it over there someday and travel around and listen to all the different accents.
Yeah.
Hello, this is Corey Anderson from Washington, Spokane, Washington. I want to leave voicemail for this upcoming show. I would love to get on a podcast with you guys one time. Please, thank you.
So you made it on.
You did it. Congratulations.
Check that off.
Yeah. I bet your
the
team,
bucket list.
I bet your team Fergie.
I'm surprised you would say that.
I'm just guessing.
Okay.
Maybe Team Gibby.
Because normally everyone's Team Gibby in your mind.
You know that.
Did you just say you're a giver?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
I'm giving you.
Okay.
That.
You're also delusional. All right, buddy. That is it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
Hold on to your jingle bells. Pluto TV has all your holiday favorites for free. Enjoy Christmas classics like Scrooge with Bill Murray or Last Holiday with Queen Latifah. Plus, dive into festive channels like Holiday Movie Favorites by Lifetime or Hallmark Movies and more. Download the Pluto TV app on all your favorite devices and start streaming holiday favorites on live channels and on demand. With thousands of free movies and TV shows, Pluto TV is your home for the holidays. Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.